Week 3 of the Corp. Hopefully you listen to Danica Patrick, but we also have a great interview with Tom Bilyeu, co-founder of Quest Nutrition. He runs Impact Theory. Tom came and visited us in New York, and this is one of those ones, A-Rod, where I had no idea who the guy was. Did my research, we did the interview, and I was like, this guy is interesting, and he's completely unique. And the thing I wanted to really point out, the stories that he told about failing at what his passion was. He wanted to be a producer, director. He went to film school. He basically not flunked out of film school, but found out that it wasn't for him. And having that experience where he was like, okay, I need to reconfigure my mindset, what I want out of life. And his parents, he mentioned this, where he was raised to be a good worker, not an entrepreneur. He had to kind of learn how to be an entrepreneur, because that's something that we talk about with all these people, the entrepreneurial spirit. And do you think you were born with it, or did you learn it?
I think I learned it, but I've always enjoyed the process, and I've been a glutton for punishment from day one. Like, I was the kid that showed up in 7th grade and would show up to my middle school at 5 a.m. and train for 2 hours. And I did that for a month. And finally, my homeroom teacher had a meeting with my mother and said, Alex comes into first period stinking every day. So that stopped. And, I always say I may be the leader of our company, but if you have to clean the toilet at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would do it happily and be singing. It's just, I'm wired that way, and it's always been process-driven, not results-driven.
What age did you become A-Rod?
It was Dave Niehaus, so 19 years old. He once, it was just a regular day out there, me playing, and instead of calling me Alex Rodriguez, the late Dave Niehaus, Hall of Famer, announcer for Seattle for over 35 years, he would say, Grand Salami, baby, bring out the rye bread and the mustard. It is Grand Salami time. Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod. So that was terrible. I'm sorry.
No, that was great.
I
that
apologize
was fantastic.
to all the young people out there.
No, do not apologize.
He just called me, and A-Rod hits a double. And I believe we were in Oakland, and I was 19 years old, and he walked down the next day before batting practice. And he goes, hey, Alex, I did something last night. It was a little goofy. I called you A-Rod, and it has a little stick to it. Do you mind if I call you that? I said, Dave, I'm 19. I'm in the major leagues. I've been called worse. A-Rod it is.
Yeah.
And it's stuck for 25 years.
So what, did you have a nickname in high school before that?
Asshole.
The guy who's better than everyone and everything?
No, I really didn't. A lot of just Al or just whatever.
Okay, I like Al.
Yeah.
That's a totally different.
Yeah, that's what Jeter calls me.
Really? What if I start calling you Al?
You're not allowed.
Okay, all right. So Tom Bilyeu, like I said, interesting part is that he admitted that he was not born with an entrepreneurial spirit. And a lot of the people we talk to, they'll tell, oh, yeah, well, I had the lemonade stand, or like, I think back to season 1, Michael Rubin talking about how he had the ski shop when he was 15. Tom Bilyeu is different than that, but he ended up in the same place. So it's a good message to people that you don't have to be the kid who, had a business at 12 to be successful later on in life. That's something you can learn through adjusting your mind and saying, hey, things are different. I want to do something different. I want more out of life. And I thought that was fascinating, because I think a lot of people give up in their mid-20s.
That's right.
When they're like, hey, I just don't have the entrepreneurial spirit. Well, you can. You can just go out and get it. And the other interesting part about Tom Bilyeu, his big break was getting with a couple guys who believed in him. And we talk about it. It's a theme throughout this entire podcast. If you go to LinkedIn, you know what we're talking about. It's networking, making sure you meet new people and get in front of new people. It was probably harder for Tom Bilyeu. It's easier now with LinkedIn, and you see it all the time, right? You go and you'll see new people all the time on LinkedIn. And
I love LinkedIn,
like
and update your resumes to young people. Make sure that you got updated resumes on LinkedIn. We never make a hire without looking at LinkedIn.
So Tom Bilyeu is a perfect example of that. I don't think I'm going to start eating like Tom Bilyeu. If I remember correctly, he eats very clean and no sugars and all that stuff. But everything else about Tom Bilyeu.
Cold tubs, too.
Yeah, cold tubs. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I forgot about that. Yeah. The fact that he learned how to, what was it? There was someone who basically figured out a way to stay underwater for an insane amount of time and work their heart rate where they can essentially not breathe for
That was aggressive.
minutes and minutes. It was very aggressive. But that's the type of guy he is.
Yeah.
He's an aggressive guy who shows you interesting things about life and is always expanding his mind. And it's great to interview people like that.
Good-looking guy, sexy, great shape.
Yeah.
Terrific
You talking
shape.
about me right now?
Both.
Okay, yeah.
And now, Tom Bilyeu.
You're listening to The Corp, presented by Barstool Sports.
Okay, we now welcome on Tom Bilyeu. He is the co-founder of Quest Nutrition. He's an entrepreneur, and he runs Impact Theory. He runs Impact Theory. It is I'm going to read the mission statement. You're going to have to explain to me what it all means. It's I read it. It's the leverage the self-sustaining power of commerce to radically influence global culture. I have no idea what that means.
I think
So
that's
let's start
very
there.
fair.
Yeah.
we should start by rewriting that. So basically using the power of storytelling, narrative, movies, TV shows, comic books to influence the way that people think at a cultural level. So my whole thing is mindset is everything, man. It is just everything. And I had at one point at the height of Quest, 3,000 employees, about 1,000 of them grew up hard as hell. I'm talking my sister got shot in the heart with an AK-47. I held my stepfather while he bled to death from a gunshot wound to the head, like that kind of hard. And just thinking about how their frame of reference was so small, they didn't believe they could do anything with their lives. They didn't believe they were meant for anything. They didn't think they could escape. And so I just started thinking, how do you influence that? And certainly where somebody grows up, like your life is largely dictated by your zip code, which is terrifying, and your parents and your friends. And so I knew I couldn't change their zip code, I couldn't change their parents, but I could actually change the way their friends thought based on what media was influencing them. Mm-hmm. And so that became the whole shtick, was how much can we really influence culture, what people think is cool, the kinds of characters people look up to, by having a maniacal focus on empowerment through entertainment.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning here of your journey. Let's start at just the beginning. Like, was there ever an aha moment? How did you get into Quest? Like, kind of walk us through the first few years of your career.
Yeah, that is a story unto itself. So my parents taught me to be a good employee, to keep my head down, do as little work as possible, and avoid punishment at all costs. And that's how I came up. I was not entrepreneurial. I did not have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. And I was teaching filmmaking and just trying to figure out how I was going to break into film. I was doing really well in film school until I wasn't. And my senior thesis was horrific, and it was really embarrassing. And it was this humbling moment that I can't even begin to tell you. And it just changed my perspective on myself.
What was it about?
It was about a kid who's basically a paranoid schizophrenic who's imagining his internal world has come to life, and he's killed his girlfriend, and his alternate personalities telling him that it's okay to basically bury the body.
Oh, that's
And
a
so-
nice, like,
right?
heartwarming
Upbeat.
film.
Exactly.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
things have changed a little in terms of the kinds of stories that I want to tell. But that's where I was then. And my films up to that point had been really successful at a film school level. And then that one was just terrible, really bad. And that's not me being humble. It was objectively a terrible
Oh, no,
film.
it sounds bad.
Yeah, very, very bad.
Yeah.
And what I realized was I didn't have talent as a filmmaker. And so that was hard. And because I had a fixed mindset, I believed you either had talent or you didn't. And so now what was I going to do with my life? And I started what we now would call a growth mindset. I started developing that just out of desperation. I didn't want to become depressed. I could feel myself sliding towards that. There was a hot debate at the time around brain plasticity, whether it was real or not. Like, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Or like, is it just life is the hand of cards that you're dealt and it's about making the most of it? And so
how old were you at the time, and how
This
much
is all
money
shaken
did you have
down.
in your bank account?
Oh, God. This was shaken down when I was probably 22, and I was negative in my bank account.
Okay.
So there were months where I couldn't pay all of my bills at the same time. I couldn't afford to furnish my apartment. I slept on an air mattress with a leak in it for like 2 years. So you go to bed on an air mattress, but you'll wake up on the floor. And so you start doing things like stuffing your clothes under the air mattress, so when it like lowers all the way, you're not just on the floor. It was a pretty gnarly time in my life, but ends up, of course, being very powerful because I knew that I didn't want to be there and that I was going to have to make some pretty radical changes. So I start developing a growth mindset, and I meet these two guys who were very successful entrepreneurs, and I'd promised myself two things as a kid. One day I'll be rich, and one day I'll have six-pack abs. Now, I had no idea how I was going to have either of those. My family was morbidly obese. And I just thought, hey, I'm going to make it happen somehow. So I meet these two guys. They're successful entrepreneurs, so they were very wealthy, and they were bodybuilders, so they were yoked. I thought, this is perfect. And so they said, look, man, we need a copywriter. Why don't you come with us? They gave me the famous line, you're coming to the world with your hand out, and if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. So come with us and get rich. And they said, you can have any job in this startup company. It was a tech company that we're starting. You can have any job you want. You just have to become the right person for the job, which means you're going to have to develop skills. And so I took them at their word. Everyone thought I was crazy, like you're leaving the security of teaching for like these crazy guys. Like, are you sure it's even real? And I just thought, I don't have anything to lose. Like, I don't even understand the pushback. Like, in the off chance that this is all real and that they're really going to create this entrepreneurial opportunity for me, I'm at least going to learn something, even if it's to what to look out for the next time. So I went with them. It ended up being this extraordinary, just really brutal boot camp of business, if I'm completely honest, because they didn't give a shit. Like, you're either going to do the work or you're not. We're not going to mollycoddle you. We're not going to waste time. Like, here's what needs to be done. Go figure it out. And that ended up being exactly what I needed. So over the next 15 years, I figured out business.
You mentioned that they were really good business people, and you mentioned they were bodybuilders. What are the characteristics in your mind that made them really good business people?
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up tied to the bodybuilding. I did not make this connection at the time, but now it seems very self-evident to me that the amount of discipline and drive and belief in change you have to show up at the gym every day and to say, no one is responsible for my body but me. There was nobody that, caused me to wuss out and not do that last rep. There was no one that caused me to eat the donut instead of the chicken breast. Like, that's all on me. And in the bodybuilding community, people are hardcore and they will do whatever it takes. And I'm talking whatever it takes. And you get guys dying way early because they've got a goal and they're literally going to do whatever it takes, even if it's bad for their health. So there's actually something really powerful in that community about the discipline, the drive, the focus, and the absolute quest for what works. And I've never seen a group of people that were more obsessive about whether or not something worked. It didn't matter if it was healthy, it just mattered that it worked. And so being around people who thought like that, and these guys happen to be much more interested in longevity, so they weren't doing some of the things that a lot of people fall prey to in that. But the thing that we always talked about was, why don't bodybuilders apply this discipline, this hunger for the truth, this inquisitive mind and willingness to work and willingness to completely buck trends when everybody else tells you that you're crazy? Why don't they apply it to other areas of their lives? Because they transform their bodies, but they don't transform their minds somehow. Until you see a guy like Schwarzenegger. And he really does, and he applies it to every area of his life, and everything that he touches becomes some, far more extraordinary version than you ever would have imagined it being. And we tried to have that same mentality. So around that time, I started getting really serious about lifting, going for the six-pack abs, and just...
Did you get them?
I did.
Okay.
I did, and I've
What'd
got the
you
photos
bench
to prove it.
at the best?
I actually don't remember. So here's why I
That
don't.
means not a lot.
It was terrible.
Yeah,
None of my numbers will impress you. But the reason that bench in particular, because I could tell you what my best deadlift was, which again is an impressive 385.
There you go.
And I was impressed with myself that I could bend over and pick up almost 400 pounds. I always thought that was pretty cool.
Yep.
But I had inflammation problems in my wrist, so I couldn't bench heavy. And then that's a whole thing about how I figured out what that was, which changed my life and was just food. Which was a huge discovery, the importance of fat, which I had avoided for decades.
So let's talk about that Quest Nutrition. Like, how did that? That you obviously get in with these guys, you start working with them, it changes your life. How do you go from there to Quest, and then from Quest on to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so Quest was a company born out of misery, and I will very much speak for myself. So we're at Awareness Technologies, and every day I'm showing up and I'm saying, I'm here to get rich. Right? I had two goals: get rich, six-pack abs. My whole thing was, I'm going to get rich, and then I'm going to go build a movie studio. Perfect, right? Sounds nice and easy to a 20-something kid. And I start going down that path, and for about 6.5 years, myopically, all I thought about was getting rich. And whatever it took, however many hours I had to work, whatever. It was just 24/7, night and day. And finally, my wife pulled me aside, and she was like, look, this is now beginning to damage our marriage. You're losing your personality. You're not fun to be around anymore. And I was miserable on a level that I can't convey. And so by that point, I was on paper, and look, you guys know the difference between paper money and bank money, but on paper, I was now a multimillionaire. And I'd earned my way to equity in the company. The company was valued at like $22 million or something. I had 10% of it, so, do the math. So, but I was so profoundly unhappy that I went in and I quit. Now, in the story, this ends up becoming this cool moment, but at the time, I was ashamed. I was like, I told these guys I was ride or die, that I would never give up, that I was the right guy to invest in to give me the opportunity. And here I am, I'm going to walk in and quit because I need to feel alive again. And so my wife and I planned to move to Greece. She's Cypriot, so they speak Greek. And so we were going to move to Greece. It was going to be this whole thing. I was going to get back to writing. I go in, I quit. They're completely shocked. I'm driving home. I tell my wife, oh my God, I did it. Like, we're moving. Like, we're this whole thing that we've been planning. Like, it's all happening. And they call me and they say, look, come out to dinner with us. And I am literally pulling into my driveway. And the sliding doors moment of how different would my life be if I didn't take that phone call is crazy to think.
And how old are you?
Now I'm probably 28, 29 maybe even 30. So this would have been around 2007, 2008. And they say, come out to dinner. And they say the words that ended up unlocking something in me, which was, we could do this without you, but we don't want to. And the reason that was important to me was it allowed me to finally be honest about what motivated and drove me. So for years, I'd been telling them that I was driven by money, that was like my religion. I was all about it. I was going to do anything within my code of ethics to get rich. And I had lived in accordance with that, and including ignoring my wife and, not being a good husband and just working myself into the ground. And so then I finally said, guys, I've been lying to myself more than anybody and to you guys by saying that money is my highest priority. It's really not. My highest priority is connections, camaraderie. And so you guys talking about like you want to do it with me as a person, a very specific person. You could go and I've given my equity back.
Right.
I didn't plan to get anything for this. So them saying that it was about something more for them as well. But I'd already done the hard part. I'd quit. And so I was like, well, if we're going to work together, it would have to be radically different. And so we'd have to sell this company, start something new. It would have to be based around value creation, have to be something that we're passionate about in and of the moment. It would have to be something that is community. And the words we would use now are authentic. But at the time, I just kept saying, I want my real personality to shine through. I was tired of just being a slick marketer and using fear tactics and all that. I was just like, this is so gross. And so my personal crisis happens to be happening right at the moment that Facebook is coming along. Nobody called it social media back then. Everybody thought it was a waste of time. But I was like, there's something to Kevin Kelly's notion of 1,000 true fans. And I was like, if we focus on that and just add value, and all of our marketing message is something that's rad, like the thing itself, the very commercial is awesome.
Right.
And that people would want to interact with it. I said, I think we could really build something. And for me, I could show up every day and be passionate because my family was morbidly obese. So if we're getting into nutrition, I can just think about saving them. And so that became the thing that at 2 a.m. on a Saturday when you want to quit and everybody else is out partying, that you buckle down and you see it through, because I knew that if I could keep this up, I could help my mom and my sister.
What's the 1,000 true fans for people who don't?
So Kevin Kelly, amazing guy, founder of Wired magazine. He had this idea that in the way the world was changing, that you could actually make a living. You weren't going to be rich, but you could make a living if you had 1,000 fans who would buy anything that you created. And so he said, develop for them.
I have that, and I'm not rich yet.
Are you sure?
Well,
Yeah.
so keep in mind.
I have 1,000, I think.
I thought you were
1,000.
300.
Yeah, around there. I have I'm close to 1,000 true fans, and I feel like I could sell them. I mean, I sold them bucket hats. We sold them a car stick.
I will say
it's
that
literally a stick.
what I know about you, almost certainly you could sell them pretty much anything.
Okay.
The key is you're not going to get rich with 1,000 true fans. So, but you can make a living. And that was the thing he really tried to get people to understand. And that was the moment I was in my life, which was I would rather love my life
Right.
and not be rich than hate my life and be rich, because that didn't take me anywhere interesting. So we flipped our whole value system and just started saying, okay, money is no longer our highest value. It's still important. And look, we're savvy business guys. By that point, I've been in business for well over a decade. So it's like we weren't being foolish. We knew that there was a huge opportunity, but at the same time, we were saying, now we're going to put value creation first. We're going to put day-to-day enjoyment. I wish we had put our hands in a pile. It was metaphorically like this. Like we put our hands in a pile and said, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to do my part to make sure you guys enjoy your day on a day-to-day basis. And if that means doing weird shit that actually doesn't make us money, then we're going to do weird shit, which is exactly how I ended up building a studio inside of Quest, which made no sense. And everybody was like, why is the protein bar guy talking about mindset? But my whole thing was I was passionate about it. It had changed my life. And I wanted to touch the lives of my employees. And so we started doing it. My partners were like, look, it really doesn't make sense, but we see how happy it's making you, so let's do it. And so it was stuff like that. And it just made a different company. And we wanted to uplift the people buying our product. So we said the first rule of Quest marketing is the same as the first rule of Fight Club. You don't talk about Quest. And so for the first year at least, we never mentioned ourselves in our marketing. It was all stuff that you could do to eat healthier. It was recipes, things like that, and what we called mirror marketing. So if the users told us they wanted something, like they started sending us recipes. So we started featuring their recipes. And then that became like this whole thing. But in the beginning, it was just us trying to be respectful to them and give them something that would be valuable, even if they didn't buy our product.
Tom, was there a moment where, I mean, you go from zero to hero in this company? Yeah, it took 15 years or so, but my question is, there's a million protein bars out there. From a product point of view, is it truly the best, or is it you telling the best story is one question. And my second one is, was there an oh shit moment that you go, okay, we are now in the map. People know who the hell we are.
There was never like a really succinct moment. I wish there was. And I'll tell you this one story, and then I'll go back to the first part of the question. So my favorite part of this whole journey was that my father-in-law, very traditional Greek guy, I went to ask his blessing to marry his daughter, and he said no.
Wow.
And it was amazing. At the time, it was not cool, but it became amazing because here he was just raw in his, like, he was not cruel. I want to be very, very clear. He was always very, very kind to me, and he's an extraordinary human being. But this guy took himself from living in the mountains in a tiny village in Cyprus, which I had never even heard of before I met my wife, and took himself to running one of the largest shipping companies in the world. I mean, just this extraordinary tale of rags to riches. And he said, look, how do you plan to take care of my daughter? And my answer to him, which to a father would not be consoling at all, was, I know what you see as an undereducated, broke kid, but I'm the most ambitious person you've ever met. Now, what he knew that I didn't know was that there's a difference between ambition and drive. I had ambition, but I was laying in bed 4 to 5 hours a day, every single day. And the only thing that got me out of bed was the shame of my girlfriend at the time, who was working to support us, was going to come home, and my one job was to make her lunch before she got there. And I was always like scrambling at the last second because, oh my God, like she's going to get here and I'm not going to have it ready. Like, that's so crazy to think that that's the same guy that 15 years later would build $1 billion brand and would work around the clock out of passion and enthusiasm, right? Mm-hmm. But that's where I was. Mm-hmm. So my father-in-law had accurately identified who I was. He was not mistaken. But what he didn't account for was transformation. And so I set about trying to become somebody that my wife is worthy, that I would be worthy to be married to her, basically. And so I go on this entrepreneurial journey, and flash forward 15 years later from him saying, like, I don't want you to marry my daughter. And he comes to see the facility for the first time. And by this point, we've gone from making the protein bars in a kitchen that we rented by the hour to 330,000 square feet, 3,000 employees. The bars are coming off the line at 1.5 million a day. It was just insane. And so I'm walking around the facility. There's like probably 800 people on the floor at the time coming up, thanking me for employment and all this stuff. I mean, like really beautiful moments. And my father-in-law is witnessing all of this. And I said, Andreas, do you remember the time you asked me how I was going to take care of your daughter? And he said, yes. And I said, how am I doing? And he just broke into tears. And it was like, by that point, my wife and I's marriage was really strong, and like she was a co-founder in the business. I mean, we had just changed fundamentally as human beings. And it was just like really extraordinary sort of moment of everything has come together. We've worked our asses off, and it's actually paid off in the real world. So that was amazing. The first part of the question was, remind me?
I was actually, one was any pivotal moments, and two, what made Quest? Was it really a great product, or was it the best story told by you?
So it was both. There's no question. So you can't outmarket a bad product, not for long. You can get a flash in the pan, you can get a hit if your marketing is good enough, but it will disappear once people realize it's not real. So our guiding light at Quest was metabolic truth. And so, like right now, I wear a glucose monitor 24/7. I'm not diabetic. I do it just because at Quest, we got so used to checking our own blood and seeing how we responded to things, and we just all got obsessed with like what can you learn about yourself? What can you see? What optimizes performance, longevity, well-being, like all that stuff. And we wanted to make sure that we were making products that people were eating because they wanted to eat it, but it was actually good for them. And the only way to judge actually good for you is what's the result on your body. And so we made choices that were financially woeful, but they were so good for the end customer that we just stuck by it.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the transformation and how you transformed from a guy who was lying in bed all day to someone who has ambition and drive. Do you ever find yourself falling back to that guy? Like, or is it basically night and day? Like, I've become this person. I'm never going back to this person.
Dan, every single day.
So when was the last time you laid in bed for a couple hours?
Never. Because
so you haven't fallen back.
No, I don't slide into the behaviors.
Right.
The impulse is there literally every day.
Right.
So I have rules, and I believe that people would be shocked what they could do to their life if they understood the power of identity, values, and rules. And what we choose to value is literally a choice. And when people think about what they pass on to their kids, they don't really think about the fact I'm just giving them an installed set of values. Mm-hmm. I'm telling them what they should care about. And people mistake it for being empirically true. So they don't realize that, oh, what your parents taught you, whether it's religion, whether it's to go to school and get good grades, whatever, all of that is made up. It is all made up. And
right.
Maybe it will work for you and maybe it won't. But you can actually decide to not value that thing. And so I decided to start valuing hard work in and of itself. Like doing something hard is intrinsically valuable. So for instance, I take a cold shower every day. Why? Because it sucks.
How cold?
It is hard. As cold as it will go.
For how long?
Wow.
It depends. Sometimes 3 minutes, sometimes
Jesus.
12 minutes. 12 is my record.
Wow.
Okay.
That you're shivering at the end of that. But do you guys know Wim Hof?
No.
Oh my God. You have to look this guy up. It's crazy. So super brief, rein me back in, but I have to give you like the 2 minute encapsulation of this dude. It is insanity. His wife dies, leaving him with his kids. She commits suicide, throws herself out of like a 13-story window. Insane. He is now depressed as the day is long. And he's in Amsterdam. He's a Dutch guy. And he's looking at this frozen pond. And he said, Tom, I don't know what happened, but something called to me and it told me I had to smash through that ice and sit in the water, which is about the weirdest thing I can imagine.
Yeah.
So he does, smashes through the ice, strips down to his underwear, and goes and sits in the water. And he said, instantly it was meditative. Nothing else mattered. The cold was so immediate, and it's like being stabbed with 1,000 little needles. He said, it has your full attention. And he said, I was just completely at peace. Now, this guy's climbed to base camp of Mount Everest in wearing only his underwear. He's run a marathon in the Arctic Circle barefoot.
See, that just seems dumb.
It's crazy. But So let me take you where this becomes really interesting to me and why I started doing this. Mm-hmm. So people called bullshit and they're like, there's no way this is real. Like, you can't do that. People die and that kind of stuff. So you're obviously not really doing it. So he said, put me in laboratory conditions. They put him in a laboratory, hook him up with all these measuring devices, put him in a big cylinder and fill it with ice and made him sit in it like 45 minutes past where most people would have hypothermia. Jesus. And he can carry on a conversation. They're measuring his internal body temperature, which he holds steady. It's pure insanity. They said, could you send heat to your right palm? He's like, I don't know. Let me try. And he sent heat to his right palm. You can measure it. So then they were like, all right, you're just a freak. He said, no, it's more than that. He said, I'm in touch with my autonomic nervous system, which is all the stuff that you're not supposed to be able to touch. It just happens. And they were like, again, we'll do it. We'll believe it only if you do it in laboratory conditions. He does it. They hit him with an endotoxin. They gave him E. coli, injected it into his bloodstream.
What?
He clamped it down. They took his blood out, injected the blood out of his body. Up to 4 hours outside of his body, he can still clamp it down. So they said, all right, you're a 1 in a trillion genetic freak. He said, nope, I can train anyone to do this. Takes 12 other people. 4 days later, all 12 can do the same thing. This shit is so crazy. So he's been like researched to the ends, right? To see if, is it real or is it total BS?
Right.
He now teaches this all over the world. The only thing you have to be really careful, he has this breathing technique, which makes you not realize you need to breathe. It's crazy and it's amazing. Right now, right this minute, I could get you guys to hold your breath probably for close to 2 minutes, even if you've never done a breath hold more than 30 seconds before in your life using his technique. It's crazy, but what he's doing is he's getting out all the carbon dioxide so your body doesn't have the impulse to breathe. So people go swimming after doing this and they just fucking die. They just sink to the bottom of the pool and they pass out. So you have to be careful, but it is beyond extraordinary. The guy is super fascinating.
That's crazy.
Sounds amazing. What do we sign up for this?
Yeah, I know. I want to do
Literally
it.
on his website, just go to it's WimHofMethod.com.
We need to go do that.
It's
so
insane.
now you do the cold shower
I
because
do the
of
cold
that?
shower. Yeah, 100%. So he was coming on my show, so I do a podcast. He's coming on the show. I always research the shit out of people.
What's the name of your podcast?
Impact Theory.
Yeah.
And so researching him, and I'm like, this shit is crazy. Like when I got to the part about the endotoxin being able to inject E. coli into him and that he could shut it down, and that this was like skeptical scientists are like, no way. And then he got other people to do it. I was like, all right, hold on. If this guy's telling me that cold showers are like the thing, I need to try it. Now, the second part, bringing this all back to hard ass things. Do you know David Goggins?
No.
You guys are in for a treat. You were in for a treat. If you can get this man on your podcast, get him instantly. So this guy believed that he was the weakest man God ever created. And so he decides, beaten, just ravaged by his father.
Okay.
And grew up just in a wildly dysfunctional household, ends up being the only black kid in an all-white school in Indiana, like something like 3 miles from a chapter of the KKK. People were like spray painting the most horrific stuff on his car and his notepad. And so he just went inward and felt broken and didn't like who he saw in the mirror. And so one day he gets this idea that he's going to become the toughest man God ever created. And he starts this thing called the accountability mirror. And he starts shaving his head in the mirror and every day telling himself, this is where you were weak, this is what you did wrong, but not to try to beat himself down, to try to inspire him to be better, to hold himself accountable. So he ends up being the only person that's done Delta training, Navy SEALs, which he did Hell Week 3 times, finished it twice, ends up completing BUDS, the Air Force Rangers. That one I'm not sure that it was Rangers. Definitely whatever the hardest thing is in the Air Force, he did that. And then becomes one of the most decorated ultra endurance athletes of all time. All while having a poker chip sized hole in his heart.
Jeez.
Which he's totally unaware of. He has sickle cell trait. Like, so when you want to discount this guy as, oh, again, you're a genetic freak, he wasn't. It's just crazy. So all with his mind. So I start like, I want to be maybe not as tough as David Goggins. You're giving up a lot to get to that stage that I'm not prepared to give up. But I want to start moving in that direction because I had to toughen up. That was my journey as an entrepreneur. I was so soft in the beginning. So I had to build in these rules and value systems and all that. So anyway, I decided that I'm going to value hard things. Taking a cold shower with Wim Hof and his thing saying that breathing and this cold exposure can give you control of the autonomic nervous system, which I've not been disciplined enough to get that far. But doing the cold exposure has changed how I feel about myself because I do it every fucking day, and every single day it sucks. Every day I do not want to do it. And every day I'm like, you're not going to hesitate. And because I have that rule of I do not hesitate, I get in the shower, I fucking turn the water on, it is cold, and I stand in that thing and I wash in cold ass water. And that's that. There's no two ways about it. There's no arguing, no discussion. It's like, and knowing every day I'm not going to want to do it. And every day I'm kicking up excuses.
So it's on mindset. Obviously, you're living it. You're walking it every day. You hate to work out, but yet you work out 5 days a week.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Again, it comes down to rules. So I used to, anybody with kids, you might want to get them out of the room at this point. But for me to work out and to change my physique, I had to imagine that someone was trying to sexually assault my wife. And so
That seems extreme.
it is extreme, and it was just what I needed. I didn't want to be there. And changing your body is hard. It is hard, man. To add muscle is hard. And so to go in and do something that I don't value intrinsically, I had to have something. And so my wife and I would work out at the gym together, and I would just stare at her the whole time and think about being too weak to stop somebody from attacking her. And so that just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. And I don't have to do that anymore.
What kind of workouts do you do now?
Now it's pretty typical. Again, to be fair, no one is going to be impressed by watching me work out. They actually would be impressed by watching my wife, who is a demon. But my workouts are push-pull legs. So I do push body parts on one day, so chest, shoulders, tries, and then pull on the next, so biceps, my entire back, and then I do legs and abs on a third day.
What did you do this morning?
Today, because literally I left my house like 12 hours ago in Los Angeles, and I'm now in New York.
Wow.
I haven't touched a bed, so I haven't been to a gym or anything. It's just a bit of a whirlwind trip. But normally, what's today? Monday, so today would have been back by.
So explain to me, like, this all makes sense. You obviously have like incredible discipline and the ability to take a cold shower, go to the gym every day. What about for like the regular guys? Because that's kind of how this podcast. We have a guy who reached the highest of highs in Major League Baseball, and then me, who is basically like the common man schlub who I do lay in bed all day, reading Twitter and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm also like accidentally successful. So explain to me, like I read motivational quotes and I'm just like, that's bullshit. Like I'm like, yeah, that like okay, cool. Like that's not gonna motivate
Did
me.
nothing for me.
Right, exactly. So like how I feel like there's a lot of me's around who just sit there and they're like, I'll just keep going through my life and it's all going to be fine.
I would say people like you only make up about 98% of the population.
Yeah, right.
So, and motivational stuff, and this is why I'm doing impact theory, the traditional fiction side, because I think that the way that I talk right now, the way that I'm being on the podcast, people that know me, I affect 2 to 5% of people max. But those 2 to 5% of people, there's like some real gratification there. But I'm obsessed with scale. And that was what pushed us at Quest to just keep going bigger. And it's what makes me want to tell stories that become part of the cultural subconscious, because that's the only way to change somebody's value system. Now, my thing is, I don't know what you want in life. You're doing very well for yourself. So it's like, I'm going to guess that what you're doing when you're laying in bed in Twitter is actually the work you need to be doing, and you're not in a world of the body. So there are things that you're doing, investing in that, facing like cold hard criticism, which you're going to see of you and what you do, that again 98% of the world beyond you could never do, which is why even what you call a schlub, 98% of them or more are never going to have the kind of success that you're going to have, because they can't face that criticism of who they are, right? So you actually have either developed or had something since you were a kid that's some real fucking fortitude. So to me, it's like, I don't believe that my way of living is the right way. So, and I think Ray Dalio said it best. And for those that don't know who Ray is, he's built the largest hedge fund in the world, ridiculously wealthy guy, wrote a book called Principles, all about how he became successful. And he says in the book, and it really, really hit me, I don't know that my life is better than the person who optimized for a stress-free, low-key life with the ones that they love. All I know is it's the only life I could have lived. And that's how I feel. Like my ambition is so intense that it just, my life couldn't have been joyful any other way.
Right.
And once I figured out that the missing ingredient for me in the beginning was I was applying all that energy to something that I didn't intrinsically care about. Once I applied that energy to saving my mom and my sister, then all of a sudden it got interesting.
So Tom, you talk about ambition and joy. Like the biggest joy in my life is my 2 baby girls, who, by the way, are half Greek, because my ex-wife, who's an incredible lady, Cynthia, has a master's in psychology. I paid for her master's in psychology because very early on I realized this is the best investment. I was near your hometown, Tacoma, Washington. I was playing for the Mariners. And I invested in her master's degree because I said, at some point I knew I was going to have a full-time psychologist at home, and that would work out well. But you and your wife, Lisa, have talked about not having kids publicly, and that's a decision, which I really respect your transparency, and focus on her and work. Tell me when and where did you come up with this decision?
Yeah, so I went through a lot of phases. So originally I was going to have kids. It just seemed so self-evident, and it was one of those values that I'd never stopped to question whether I actually wanted kids or not. And I could write you poetry, literally, where you'd be convinced that I have kids. Because I get it. I big brothered for a kid, first of all, for 8.5 years. That's a whole nother story, which actually fed into why I wanted to do impact theory, because I was not able to help him in the way that I wanted to. I was too young, too stupid. So I get it. I get what it means to love another human being and to feel like you could really impact and touch their lives. It really is beautiful. And the easiest way for me to explain it is I really, really want kids. The only thing I want more than I want to have kids is to not have kids. So it's 2 competing things that I want. It's not like one isn't attractive. I get why people have kids, man. It is beautiful. It's fulfillment incarnate. It's transformational in a way. It's a kind of love that you just can't know about, to the point where even I know, because I've never done it, I don't actually know. So even the depths that I feel I understand, there's something beyond that. So thinking through it was really, I love my life. Like my life, I have a deep and lasting sense of fulfillment. And that comes from the people that I'm trying to serve by building a skill set that is unique to me, that I value, that was hard as hell to acquire. And it allows me to take care of my own family, but it also allows me to touch the lives of others. So that's been, that feels good. It's what the Greeks call techne. So that was a huge part of it. And then once my wife discovered entrepreneurship, then she was finding fulfillment. So she was less interested. So in the beginning, it was just we were putting it off. 2 more years, 2 more years, 2 more years. And I started conceptualizing like how I would continue to have the life that I have now. And I came up with this whole idea of a padded room. Follow me here, gents. Do you have kids, Dan?
No.
Okay, so you may get behind this. You're going to think I'm a total freak and you're going to be very glad I don't have kids. But I had this whole idea of, okay, it's just crazy to me that mothers will talk about how they can't even take a shower. And I was like, but why don't people just like build? Obviously, you have to have the resources. I fully understand that. But if you have the resources, why couldn't you build a padded room where there's no sharp angles, nothing? You've got, like, let's say you're in the shower and you have a CCTV camera feed. You can see exactly what's going on. They're right down the hall.
You're putting them in like a psych ward.
I like
Your
to think of
kid.
it as a playroom.
Okay,
How about
got
that?
it.
So, but you put them somewhere where they can't be hurt, because that's everybody's concern, right? That the child's somehow going to hurt themselves. And when I started talking about that and I saw, like, I would get arrested. Like, people were so horrified by that notion. I thought it's probably best that I try to maybe not optimize for like some alternate way to do this. Yeah. And I just accept that if you're going to be a parent, be a parent. And the best piece of advice I got about being a parent was from another entrepreneur, and he had kids, and I was just like, look, I love what I do and I love what I'm building. I don't want to give that up. He said, Tom, have kids, don't have kids. It doesn't matter. But whatever you do, do it all the way. And I thought, that's the best advice I'm ever going to get.
Yeah.
And so I realized I just want to be an entrepreneur all the way.
So you mentioned the scale of trying to impact people. I really like that part because, like I said, like I'm someone who I read a motivational quote and it just washes right over me. And 2 to 5% of people might listen and be like, wow, that really impacted me. And then the rest of the world's like, wait, this doesn't change me whatsoever. So right. What are you doing to scale where you can start reaching people like me to kind of change the habits they have in their lives because of, like, I think there's just a lot of people who just read motivational quotes and it just doesn't register. Yeah. And I'm one of those guys.
Honestly, like, motivational quotes are pretty much a waste of time.
Yeah.
So I am terrified of the space of motivational or spiritual entertainment. And if all you're doing is giving someone inspiration or motivation, like I'll do speeches, and I know the effect that I have on people. And if you get me up on stage for 2 hours, that person will feel like they can do anything. That is the thing that I've worked to be able to create that effect on people. But it is an ever-declining arc of going to nothingness. Right. So when you're there and I'm on stage and I'm giving it to you, you're like, I can do it.
My diet's going to start tomorrow.
1,000%. I'm going to own everything. Cold showers, I'm in.
Yep.
2 hours later, you're like, nah.
Fuck no.
Not fucking around with that.
No.
So I was just like, okay, that's really frustrating. That's really sad. Like, I want to see people change. But the reality is, there is no moral obligation to change. So people need to, like, don't feel like you have to change. If your life is fulfilling, if you're happy, you're already done. There's nothing else to do. What you see is me playing out my life the way that I have to in order to be fulfilled, to love my life, to show up and play hard, right? So I've got to be playing all out or I'm just not interested. So that's a big thing for me. And then if like you really wanted to change and you came to me, we would be talking about identity and values. Because if you truly valued something, then you would begin to make changes in accordance with that. And then if you're hanging out with other people that value that and they're judging you and making fun of you and giving you a hard time and putting massive amounts of peer pressure on you to make that change, which I'm sure you saw in professional sports, it's like, yo, motherfucker, if you're not playing up to the standards, get the fuck off my team, right? And it's not about play anymore. But when you think about baseball, it's really just a game. But the intensity and the money and everything around it, it stops being a game real fucking fast.
Right.
And you get people who are striving for legacy, for greatness, to do something that will be remembered. Now all of a sudden you get enough of those people aimed at each other and you create this environment of, well, shit, just to fit in, I want to play at this level. And all of a sudden their life has changed. Why? Identity, a desire for camaraderie and to fit in, their value system. That's what shifted. Their behavior just becomes a natural outcropping of that. So it's like the world you've created for yourself with Barstool Sports, it makes sense. Like, you're speaking to someone in a way that speaks their language. You are one of them. It allows you to be successful. So there's actually some internal pressure on you to remain, again, your word schlub. I would not use that, but like, I get it. But you're also sort of the uber schlub, right? Like you're fucking crushing it. You're killing it. You're doing so much stuff that I read one article where you're saying like, I really have to think about how I parse things out and what I give my time and attention to because this is my baby. I really want to make sure that it lives and breathes. Most people aren't talking like that.
Right.
Most people are like, I fucking hate my job. I just want to get home, play some video games, have a little sex, get drunk, like, and just repeat. So you're already sort of on a different level of existence. So now it's just the person out there who really is feeling depressed, they're not happy with where their life is, that's the person I want to help.
Right.
And the only way to help them is to change what they value. The only way to change what they value is to change their zip code, their parents, or how their friends think. And that's the mission. But at scale, because then you're hitting them emotionally.
Right. Interesting.
Tom, I have a question for you. So there's a lot of our young listeners. They're at this kind of conundrum. Where do they go? You know, you have the. If you 20 years ago, you ask your dad, or ask any entrepreneur, what should you do? Well, they say go 4, 2, and 2. Go to the best school you can find. Go work for Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan, and then go find the best business school. Right? Go to B school. What would you tell our young audience today to do?
Yeah, very clear message. So some jobs are going to require that you go get a degree, in which case you're going to need to go to college. Alternatively, I really believe in like an old school style apprenticeship because here's the reality. Money can only be spent once unless you're really good at investing it. Skills, on the other hand, monetize forever. Skills and connections are what I tell people they should be focused on. That is it, skills and connections. So when people ask me, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? First of all, I'd grab that motherfucker by the lapel because I have very little time to make a deep impact. And I would say, you have one mission. You're going to go give the following speech to as many people that you respect as humanly possible. Find the person that's living your ideal life and tell them, I will work for you for free for the next 90 days. I will work harder and smarter than anyone ever. Nothing will be beneath me. I will pick up dog shit. I will take out your trash, whatever you want. And I will make you believe in a higher power just by how hard I'm working. You won't be able to understand how one human could be this driven. Then fucking deliver on that, actually work that hard, actually be that down for anything, ride or die, and then tell them, all I want in exchange for this is knowledge and connections. I don't want money, don't pay me anything. At the end of the 90 days, because I have to eat, at the end of the 90 days, if I've made myself so valuable to you that you would rather pay me than lose me, then bring me on payroll. If not, we shake hands and we part ways. If you are diehard, that will work, man. That will work. But right now, we're in an era and culture where I'm fucking worried for people because they're so like tit for tat that they don't want an internship. They want to get paid. Listen, fine. It's
And
not gonna
equity.
fuck me up.
And equity.
Right. It's like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm already rich. Like, this isn't a thing that like hurts me somehow or woe is me. This is like a guy whose life is predicated on being able to help other people live their best life. I'm telling you, my biggest piece of advice, go learn. Go learn.
So I happen to agree with you. I think, people who can prove their worth before they get a paycheck is always like, I'm thinking about even just my journey in Barstool, like proving that you can add something before you start getting paid is obviously something that will like change the mind of a business owner or your boss right away. But there is an argument to be made that, internship and unpaid internship is kind of like people just taking advantage of free labor, and not everyone has the resources or the safety net to be like, hey, I can just go not work. I can go work with no paycheck for 90 days. So like, what do you say to someone like that who's like, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I have no ability to go work for someone for 90 days and not get paid. I got debt. I have to eat. I have to pay rent, all these things. What does a person in that situation do?
So you're going to have to find a way nights and weekends. So life does not give a shit about your circumstances. That's just a cold, hard truth. And you're either going to make it or you're not. And if you want to, again, my way of living is not the right way for everybody. I fully understand that. I'm going to make the presupposition that you want to be great, that you want some element of the extraordinary in your life. You want to be the best podcaster ever. You want to be the greatest investment banker. You want to be a sports star, whatever. It doesn't fucking matter. You have one job if that's what you want to do. You have to, with your skill set, leave people in awe. That's it. You have to leave them in awe. Now, you don't get to campaign about it. You don't get to say, oh, but I have tough beginnings. No one gives a shit. You either leave them in awe or you don't. Jay-Z could have sat around all day and told you how bad things were for him, and he would be right. But you don't care. What you care about is what he's built. You see him traverse music, first of all, start getting his own masters, which was crazy and unheard of, launch his own companies, and now really be doing something extraordinary. He leaves people in awe, and that's why he's been able to become what he's been able to become. And my thing is, people need to understand one simple truth. The thing that stands between where you are now and where you want to be is a gap of skill set. That's it. It's not a gap of who your parents are. My parents weren't rich. It's not a gap of who you know. It may eventually play out that you have to meet the right people, but it doesn't matter that you know absolutely nobody now. I certainly didn't know anybody. It's about getting so good at something that you can make someone money. Mm-hmm. And if you're so good at something that you can't be ignored, to steal from Steve Martin, you will get work, for sure. You will advance, for sure. You will get access to people, money, everything, for sure. Because you have a skill set that matters. Mm-hmm. It matters to somebody who's trying to monetize it. And this is like my pet peeve. And I'm angry at myself, I think, more than anybody else, because I don't know how to make this clear, and I can tell in people's eyes when I say this doesn't land. Skills have utility. By that I mean, learning to be an architect means you can build buildings, and those buildings stand, and they let people rent them out, and it is a skill that ends up creating something that is very real, very tangible. And people think of getting skills as the 422. It's checking a box. It's making mom and dad happy. It's having the degree. Instead of saying, what the fuck do I need to do to learn how to build a business, which may or may not be going to business school. I did not go to business school. I went to film school. And yet I've built $1 billion business because I learned business. I went on by the time we started Quest, called a 12-year sojourn into the desert of building businesses, trying to figure this shit out. And it was brutally painful and not fun at all. I made every stupid mistake you could possibly imagine. But I came out the other side. Thank God there was no social media. So I wasn't trying to talk to anybody. I was just trying to learn. But because I spent all that time learning, I came out the other side with the ability to build $1 billion business. So it's like all of that stuff has real consequence in the real world because you got a skill, right? So let's talk about baseball. Hitting a fastball is fucking hard.
Yes.
And people often talk about it as the hardest thing in sports that you could ever do. But also, when you're 6, you can't hit a major league fastball. And so people get that you have to learn, grow, and progress. And so you have to get better. And you could have been the most talented 6-year-old, but if you didn't keep practicing and just going after it like crazy, you would not become one of the greatest of all time. The same is true of anything. So people think, oh, I wasn't born with natural talent. Great. You're not going to be the next A-Rod, fine. But you could be extraordinary. You could still have a life that revolves around that. You could still be one of the greats, even if you're not the greatest. So getting people to be obsessed over the acquisition of skills is like my mission in life.
You know, what's interesting about sports is if you see Shaquille O'Neal and then you see Tom, you see a difference right away, right? If you see a guy like C. Sabathia and you see you guys know you're different. In business, it's not quite like that. I mean, the three of us can be in a room and it can be the same type of separation, except it's going to take you a long time or a short time. But it's not with a visual. We know that Shaq is amazing. Now, tell our audience, our listeners, because I think a lot of people get stuck about, like, they say networking. They say, well, I want to just be a connector. Does that mean writing 10 emails a day? Does that mean showing up at the local conference? Does that mean driving across country to listen? For me, it was Magic Johnson and Greg Norman and Arnold Palmer, people that were doing it at the highest level, that had the most beautiful second and third acts, and people that I wanted to be like. Because as a 10-year-old, I wanted two things. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and I wanted to be a CEO. And so I had to look at people, not necessarily people like Barry Sternlicht or Mark Mastrov or Warren Buffett, because they didn't play baseball. I needed to see people that were great star players and then became even better business people. But from a connecting point of view, give us some technique that they can actually go out and do.
So one, I will say that if you feel like you're an introvert and you don't have great skills at networking, neither do I. I am so bad. I'm so bad at making like a cold intro that people would actually be surprised. But you have to go out and meet people. There's just no two ways about it. So Impact Theory is getting into the comic industry. And so I have to pound the pavement. I've got to go to every comic book convention, walk the show floor, find people that are rad, reach out, shake hands, introduce myself, knowing they're not going to know who I am. They're not going to care who I am. I'm going to have to keep coming back and back and back and back. And then picking a few people that I'm going to research and I'm going to know something about them. So when I go up, that I can have a warm conversation that honors their work or whatever it is that they're doing, so that then they're more receptive and they're more open. And there are definitely tactics. And I will just say, the first one is know thy audience, right? Know who you're going to talk to and be thinking about how you can deliver value. You said it right off the top. It's like, once you understand, like, I'm going to be able to add value to this person in this way, then extraordinary things begin to happen. So I will tell you, because I am so bad at making a first impression, I was like, all right, I need something that pitches to my strengths. So one of the reasons that I've kept doing the show, the podcast, Impact Theory, is because I know that if people come onto the podcast, from the first of my employees that they touch, they will be extraordinary. They will be warm and kind and on point and all that. So they're going to already be like, whoa, this is great. The second they walk into our environment, everyone is going to be happy and upbeat, excited to see them, well prepared, take them into their space, get them set up. And then I'm going to know that person better than their own mother. And by the end of the interview, I'm always trying to see if I can have found something, some insight into them, their mind, what they're trying to do, that makes them go, whoa, like, you've really done your research, which makes them feel honored and appreciated and understood, which then brings a bond and a connection. And so now, all of a sudden, me being super awkward at making introductions, I come across wonderfully because I put myself in the position where I know I'm good, which is I will do an inhuman amount of work because I have that curiosity. Like, I want to learn about this person. I want to know about them. And once I can click into something there, then we've got some common ground. But at the end of the day, I don't ever want people to lose sight of pound the pavement.
It's interesting because it's funny because we obviously do a podcast here. I have, pardon my take as well, but after every guest, I'm like, I know that person, like, we're best friends now. Like, I'm going to hit you up for a loan in a couple of months. All right. I have one last question. I read this on your Instagram. I need you to tell me if there's any hope for me. So you had the 6 best decisions you can make in your 20s. Now I'm out of my 20s, but I want to read them because I don't think I made any of them. First is apprenticed. We talked about that. Don't try to maximize your dollar. Try to maximize your knowledge. Money only spends once. Knowledge can be monetized forever. So that I guess I kind of did that one. So I'm one for one. Read every single day. I do not read. Do you read every
Twitter.
single day? That counts?
And Twitter's your stock and trade,
That's
right?
great.
So,
There's books here, though.
It's good literature.
Yeah, explore as many areas of interest as possible. What is that just in general?
Well,
like I've been really into, like, flat earthers. Does that count?
For your work, it does, because you have to be at the pop culture zeitgeist. Like, we're living in a really weird time. I know that was meant for comedy.
No,
so forgive
it's
me
not
for
even.
like
No,
diving in.
No,
but yes, it would not be interesting to me because I don't debate people and stuff on my podcast. I don't give a shit. So, like, that seems crazy to me. So I just let it go. But yeah, learning something new every day comes down to Kevin Kelly again. He has this concept of don't prematurely optimize. And he said, you basically need to explore. You need to try a lot of different things. And most people don't, like, here's the misconception about passion. People think that lying inside of every one of us is a true purpose, a calling, our deepest passion, and that we have to turn inward, archaeological dig, find that thing, and then live in accordance with that.
Right.
It does not work like that. So the reality is that you're just going to decide one day that, oh, I'm going to be about ending metabolic disease, which literally I decided one day I'm going to end metabolic disease. And it became an entire movement of my life. It was almost a decade of my life that I was entirely focused on that. And then one day I said, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull people out of the matrix by giving them an empowering mindset through movies and TV. And so then that became my mission. And so I switched directions. I started doing that. So encountering the things, enough things to find out what has a real spark of interest. Because you don't want to try to build that on top of something like I did with money that isn't real.
Right.
So you build it on top of a real spark of interest. Then you can fan that into a raging inferno.
Okay.
But people expect to see a raging inferno inside, and they're never going to.
So I actually did that. That's a good explanation to it. Finding that one thing that makes, that gets you interested, and then building off that. Number 4, don't drink or do drugs until at least 25. Your brain is still developing until you're 25. I missed that one big time.
Most people do.
Okay, so 25, is that true?
That's true, yeah. So, and that's purely tactical. Like, I don't care if people drink and do drugs, have fun. But my thing is, your brain is developing until you're 25, and will be impacted negatively, unfortunately, by most drugs. I don't know enough about drugs to put a full stamp and say every drug, because obviously some of the stuff they're coming out with psychedelics, maybe I'm not the right guy for this conversation.
We're going to get into microdosing?
But, well, have you microdosed?
No, I'd like to.
I've tried it.
Is it good?
It was totally, so far, because I've not done it right,
Yeah.
been pointless. I was too micro, and I
Okay.
didn't notice. I literally noticed nothing.
I've macrodosed. It's mushrooms, right?
I haven't. Well, I didn't
Okay.
do mushrooms, but
Yeah.
I have not.
I'd like to
microdosed.
microdose. We got a microdose someday. I don't know if A-Rod wants to do that. Get sleep.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Oof, my friend. That
How many
that one
hours
I'll
a
say
night
is
do you sleep?
non-negotiable. You should sleep as much as you need. So, for the last 15, maybe almost 16 years now, I have not used an alarm. So, look,
That's
if I have
psycho.
a
That's
5 a.m.
psycho.
flight, of course I'm going to set an alarm.
Yep.
But no, I go to bed at 9 p.m. and I wake up when I wake up. It
That's
just
psycho.
is what it is.
And when do you usually wake up?
I wake up pretty early, so my typical night is 5 to 6 hours. But that was not always the case. So, like, back at Quest, I was sleeping a lot more.
So you wake up at like 2 in the morning?
I wake up at 2 to 3 in the morning, yeah. Not every day. I want to be real clear.
And what do you do when you wake up?
I have a.
You're like, why the fuck am I up at 2
well,
a.m.?
I've got
I
rules.
should have set an alarm.
I've got rules and routines, so they all kick in.
Give us some of your rules.
I'm out of bed in 10 minutes or less, no matter what. If I've had 5 hours or more of sleep, once I realize I'm awake, I start a clock 10 minutes and I get up, and then I immediately go to the gym. Post gym, I immediately meditate. Post meditating, I do what I call thinkitating. After thinkitating, I read if I have time. After that, then I'm going to take my cold shower, and then after that, I'm going to dive into my important things list. I don't check email literally almost ever. I'll probably reply to, personally, less than 5 emails a week for sure. Anything that can be handled in person is. I don't take meetings before 10 a.m. So if I'm up at, let's say on a super average day, I'm up at 4 a.m. Okay, so if I'm up at 4 a.m. and I don't take my first meeting until 10, I've got 6 hours to get shit done, just total me time. So that's super critical. And it all kicks off immediately because there's like one rule leads into the next.
Coffee?
I do Diet Coke, which is for sure killing me and absolutely moving me away from some of my goals.
counterintuitive. Like
I know.
building an entire business to help save people and like their metabolic rate, and then you're just like, let me have a Diet Coke.
Yep. And here's part of why. Of all the things that I can measure right now, I can't see a negative impact, even though I know it's there. I can't see it, and that out of sight, out of mind is just enough. And it's magically delicious, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Tom, I got to go back to the emails because I'm so jealous. 5 emails a week, and you're running like this conglomerate, right? $1 billion business, and your new deal with Impact Theory.
Yep.
How is that possible?
So, one, full disclosure, I do have an assistant who will check for the 5 emails that matter so that I am making sure that they get replied to. Because there are definitely times where an outside opportunity will come in and people are so used to using email that it's going to come in that way. I'm just not the one that has to go through the other 600 emails to find those 5. And then I just tell people in my company, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can train them, don't ever email me. So if you need something, come and say it to my face. It's
I like
so
that.
much more efficient.
Yeah, because I do find that people use email and text instead of like a face-to-face conversation a lot of times.
Or a
It's
call.
so crazy.
Right.
People don't
Or
call anymore.
Yeah, people don't call.
Yeah, and I'm the worst at that. Like if you call me, I'm gonna look at the phone like, why the fuck are you calling me? You can text
Yeah.
me. This is crazy. What kind of world are we living in?
I know.
So,
I hate when
yeah.
people.
Same rule
crazy.
applies for text?
No, text I'm a lot more lenient on, but I tell people that you won't hear from me until the end of the day. So I don't have any alerts on my phone. So like right now I may have 75 text messages waiting. I won't know. I have to go all the way into the app to see if there's any text messages
What if
waiting.
it's someone like, help, I'm trapped in a
They're
well,
going to die.
Tom.
And they know that. And I've
Okay.
told my family, I'm not the guy you call if you have an emergency. 911 is who you call. You will hear from me
What's
later
all that
day.
weightlifting for? Like I'm
Yeah.
being attacked. You've
my
lifted
wife
all
will
these
have
weights.
to be with me for that to be in any way, shape, or form useful.
Sounds very compassionate.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, it's been a
It's
real
awesome.
thrill. It's
Yeah.
been awesome, and congrats on all your success.
Yeah, you've changed my mind a little bit. I'm a natural born skeptic, so I'm at least buying some of what you're selling here.
And I will try a
Respect.
cold shower tomorrow morning.
I'm gonna try it too.
Dude.
yeah, not
Let
at 2
me know.
a.m.,
There's no way I'm trying
but
it.
I will try it.
There's a 0% chance I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try. You know what I'll do is I'll take a hot shower and then at the end I'll have a cold.
That counts.
Okay.
We'll count that.
What, for
That's
like 15
Wim Hof's-
seconds?
You start there. It's perfect. You'll
What
find.
what really counts? Minute?
Well, do you want Wim Hof method?
Yeah,
or-
I want to go. I want to be the dude who just fucking kills diseases
So-
with his brain.
Nice.
Yeah.
What Wim
That's
Hof?
that's what he does, right? I mean, that's. Did I get that right?
He kills E. coli with his mind.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
He would say that you need to get the adaptive response from the cold. So how long that will take will largely depend on how cold the water is. So if you're here in New York in the winter and you're taking a cold shower straight from the faucet, you could get real cold in 1 to 3 minutes, like really cold.
Okay.
Last question is, where do you want Impact Theory to be in 5 years?
In 5 years is a very near term. So I would say I would want at least 3 of our projects to be at a major studio and financed.
Cool. Awesome. I know a guy, Peter Chernin.
My man.
Yeah, he's my boss. So if you want to,
I like him
I
already.
can connect him.
That would be
Connectors.
amazing. I would
Yeah,
take
yeah.
that for
Connectors.
sure.
Actually, he would never respond to an email of mine, but I do have his email, so I'll give it to you.
All right. That's one step closer.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.
Thanks
Tom,
for having me,
thank you.
guys. This was awesome.